Hi everybody, welcome to my little live YouTube video. I just wanted to go on today and actually quickly run through chapter 1 of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So I know many of us are home, we're working on developing our yoga practice, and here I just wanted to introduce some concepts from chapter 1. I know when I first started engaging with this material, it went way overhead, and it's nice to have someone to give you a little commentary on the commentary of the Yoga Sutras to help us just understand it, engage with it a little bit better, and improve our own understanding. I don't really claim to have any profound understanding in any of the field of yoga. Mostly a beginner myself. So take what you can, and if there's mistakes, they're on me. Anything that you learn, it's coming from my teachers. So if you have a copy of the Yoga Sutras, go ahead and grab it out, break it out now. We're just going to look at the first chapter. So the best advice that I've been given when engaging with this material is to imagine that you're reading Patanjali's Yoga Sutras like a movie where there's good characters and bad characters, protagonists and antagonists. And that helps to give you, I guess, a way into the dense kind of philosophy. So first sutra, Atta Yoganushasanam. So now Atta Yoganushasanam. Now begins the explanation of the discipline of yoga, the subject of yoga. So next sutras, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So we've been introduced to a few new characters here. Chitta, Vritti, Nirodha. So the Chitta is like mind stuff. Vrittis are fluctuations, oscillations. And Nirodha is the stilling, the flatlining of those ups and downs. So next sutra, 1.3, Tada Drashtahu Svarupe Avasthanam. So at that time, when the fluctuations of the consciousness, if you picture a heart monitor, like you've seen on maybe TV movies, when that heart monitor goes flatline, so when the monitor of your mind goes flat, when the lake becomes still, you can see the bottom of the lake. So when the lake of the consciousness is still, you can see the bottom of the lake. So at that time, the seer dwells and rests in its own true state. So the purpose of yoga is to take us to our natural state of self, our natural way of being. At other times, next sutra, 1.4, at other times, the seer, our essential self, identifies with what it's looking at, with what it's seeing in the external world. So, right, at other times, the seer is identifying with the fluctuating consciousness rather than the seer of that consciousness, which we essentially are. So these movements of consciousness are five-fold. So the mind, the consciousness, works in 5 different modes. So we're going to talk about these modes now. These states of consciousness can either be pleasing or non-pleasing. We can recognize them or we can not recognize them. They can be afflictive in that they cause us pain, klista, or they can be aklista, where they take us away from the pain, the bondage, the suffering, and towards emancipation, towards yoga. So the first, pramana, viparya, vikalpa, nidra, smritihi. These are the 5 states. So the first is correct knowledge. Pramana. Correct knowledge is direct. It can be inferred or proven as factual. So direct knowledge, something that you're seeing directly. You see, or it can be through inference. So if you see smoke somewhere on the horizon, you can infer that there's probably fire somewhere in the horizon. So that's a correct knowledge, valid knowledge as the first. The second can be illusionary knowledge or non-fact, having false news, fake news. Then imagination, verbal knowledge, devoid of anything real. So remember, all 5 of these can be used to take us towards yoga or away from yoga, depending on the applications. So imagination does have a role to take us towards yoga, but it could also just take us away. It depends on our mode of application of the state. So then smriti, nidra, sleep is the non-deliberate absence of thought-waves sleep. We know a deep sleep. There's dreamless sleep. There's no sense of I, no sense of self, no sense of body, mind. It's just a state of void. Smriti, memory. So memory is the unmodified recollection of words and experiences. Okay, so these are our 5 states of consciousness, 5 modes that the mind stuff can operate under. Correct knowledge, false knowledge, imagination, sleep, and memory. So now Patanjali is going to talk about the mode, the means to bring these 5 states of consciousness into its control, or into some sense of reining them in. Abhyasa, Vairagya. These are the means to go towards yoga. So Guruji here, B.K. Iyengar here describes these Abhyas and Vairagya as the 2 wings of your yoga sadhana, of your yoga practice. You know, a bird has a right wing, it has a left wing, and it has to coordinate the flapping of those wings to fly, to take flight, and then eventually, as a high-flying bird, to catch a, what are they called, updrafts, and just soar, glide. So we have to use our practice, Abhyas, and Vairagya, this sense of renunciation, in a coordinated way to fly with our yoga practice. So this abhyasa is a steadfast effort to still these fluctuations. So those 5 states of awareness, we're constantly moving between one and the other, and they kind of mesh up and interfere with each other. So they're not 5 distinct, but they can be kind of meshed up like a fist. And we're constantly moving into one or the other, or diving, dipping in and out, dipping in and out, dipping in and out. So the abhyasa is the repeated efforts, that's day after day, week after week, hour after hour, breath after breath, of stilling these wild fluctuations of the consciousness, to take them from being wild oscillations and fluctuations and bring them into some range bound. So instead of going from completely depressed to completely elated in the span of 24 hours, you can go from a kind of a substandard state to maybe an above standard state. So a little bit unhappy to a little bit happy, and then eventually coming to that neutral state of being where we're undisturbed by the external world. So that's our practice. And then the renunciation. So again on the practice. So this has to go on for a long, uninterrupted time. With the word he says, Sanskrit word, dirgha kala, so long, uninterrupted practice time. So like I said, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, breath after breath, moment after moment. So this has to be a constant endeavor. So then renunciation, which is the renunciation is the practice of detachment from desires. So I've also heard this vairagya described as thirstlessness. So it has different stages. So these are our 2 heroes now of this story, abhyasa, vairagya. So abhyasa is that effort to still the fluctuations. This vairagya is the effort to detach us from the external world, from the desires of our mind. So Guruji here gives us an example. If you are a coffee drinker or maybe a smoker, you have some relationship with cigarettes or coffee. You either identify as a smoker or as a non-smoker, as a coffee drinker or as a non-coffee drinker. So let's pretend that you're an avid coffee drinker and you're wanting to first lessen your attachment to the coffee, vairagya. So the first thing you do is start to lessen your intakes. Maybe you're drinking 6 cups a day, you go down to 4, you go down to 3, you go down to 2 to 1. So you're still a coffee drinker, but you're slightly, you moved away from being such an extreme coffee drinker. Then one fine day comes and you switch over to ginger tea. You drink ginger tea for many, many years. Then you start identifying as a non-coffee drinker, but still in your mind, there's that relationship with coffee. So the vairagya is actually going to the state where the coffee holds no gravity over you. You don't have either attachment or aversion to you, but you're completely beyond it. So that's the process. And he lists here, Patanjali lists here on 1.16 the different stages. He lists 5 different stages of that renunciation. So when this can happen, after we've gone through this this abhyasa and vairagya, we're using these wings of our yoga sadhana, then we come to samadhi, this state of being, which is yoga, where we're in our natural state of being. And he's actually going to list a few different types of samadhi: vitarka, vichara, ananda, asmita, rupa. So the first process of samadhi, it comes in vitarka, which is self-analysis. Then using the frontal kind of lobe of the brain. Then vichara, back lobe of the brain. Ananda, this is when we're starting to go towards self. It's a state of bliss. And like I said earlier in the video, I'm not profound in my understanding of any of these. My experiences of samadhi is not so deep that I can speak of these from firsthand experience, but just what I've been told by my teachers and what's in the literature here. We have those states of samadhi, the preliminary states of samadhi. So when we are in those experiences, there's a void. And if you've ever experienced a kind of an insight, maybe you're driving your car, you're in the shower, or you're just quietly sitting with a cup of tea, coffee, and you have this kind of insight, this idea comes to you. The same thing happens with a practice of meditation, samadhi. When you're sitting in a state of silence, sometimes things can come up. And those are little elements of desire that we still have to deal with. So in our practice, that's going to happen. When you get into that still, quiet state, something will arise that you have to deal with. So now we have 5 more heroes in our story: Shraddha, Vira, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna. So the practice must be pursued with Shraddha, with trust, faith. It should be gone with vigor, confidence, keen memory, and this absorption. So have faith in your yoga practice, trust it, go at it with a sense of zeal, of vigor. Remember your experiences, remember your classes so that you can apply them in future practices. And also have this ability to be absorbed in the practice of asana and pranayama. And that will lead you towards this state of yoga. So then he's going to list different types of students. Some people are a little bit mild, casual. You get the people who are just going to sit in their sukhasana a little bit slunched over. You have those people who are a little bit too keen. And then you have that fine middle path student. So we have these. You come from the most mild kind of a student to the most intensely intense kind of student. And he goes through these different things, these different gradations of students. And for the student who is very intense, the goal of yoga is quite near. So anyway, I've gotten to 1.26. Maybe I'll carry on from there in a next video. I told myself I'd keep these under 15 minutes for your sake. Anyway, it's a little bit of a rambling. Pick up your Yoga Sutras, start to engage with the subject, and time in isolation.